Here we are on day 5. I got the brake fluid flushed on the front caliper. I actually did that yesterday, but on day 4, but I didn't film it or anything. So here's a tip for you guys. If you get a small piece of rubber hose and you put it on the nipple, I said nipple, then you stick the other end in some sort of container. This is the old brake fluid that I flushed out of it. Pretty nasty. But if you stick the other end in there and pour some brake fluid to where the end is submerged, come over here, make sure you can get these screws loose, take the cover off, and then just set it back down there. You don't have to put the screws in it. When you hold the brake closed and you crack that nipple, it's going to shoot brake fluid through the hose and down into the reservoir, where you've already got a little bit of brake fluid down here just so the end is under the fluid. Then all you have to do is simply just pump the brake and watch the level in the reservoir. As it gets low, add more brake fluid. Just keep pumping until you get fresh, clean brake fluid coming out of there. Since the end of the hose is under fluid, it can't draw air back in. So you just pump it, pump it, pump it, add fluid, pump it. And every time you add fluid, make sure you put the cap back on the reservoir up there, because when you pump it, it'll actually shoot a stream of brake fluid up and out. So you just basically add fluid, just lay the cap back on, pump it, keep pumping until all the old brake fluid is out and you got new brake fluid in it. And then just tighten the bleeder and pull the hose off and you're done. You don't have to go and re-bleed the brakes or anything like that, because you've introduced no air into the system. All you've done is just pump the old fluid out while adding new fluid in. So we've got that. I've got to run up to the auto parts store, get some electrical contact cleaner and some dielectric grease, and I'll start going through that. Then we got to adjust the chain, get the bike off the lift, roll it around front to where I have access to water hose, degrease it and rinse it off, then bring it back in, put the cover on and button this thing up. And I think, other than the turn signals, waiting on those and a couple little odds and ends, I think we're pretty much done with this. Obviously, give it a couple test rides, make sure everything is dialed in. Oh, I still do need to sync the carburetors. So that's actually pretty easy to do. That's what we're focusing on today. So I'm going through cleaning up all the electrical connections to show you what I'm doing. First, I really like this CRC electrical cleaner. For one, it flashes off really fast, it dries really fast. And then I like the CRC dielectric grease. What I'm doing is, like, here's the connections for the fuse box. They all look pretty good. If I see something that's really nasty, I'll take some really fine sandpaper and clean them up. As you can see, I've got dielectric grease in these already. And what I'm doing is I put a little dab on there, then I take my thumb and I just press it in, basically like packing a wheel bearing. And the purpose of this is to create a watertight, airtight barrier around the electrical connections so they don't corrode anymore. And it also lubricates the plastic where it plugs in. So I've already got this mess done. I've got the fuse box, brain fart, and I'm basically going to work my way all the way around. And I do this with every bike that I get that's used. I always go through and check all the electrical connections and clean them, because on older bikes, that's the number one issue, is electrical gremlins. I know on my 98 over there, I had a bunch of electrical issues. So I'm just going to spend the next hour or so. I did fire it up, warm it up a little bit. Once I get some of these connections done, I'm going to fire it back up again, warm it up, warm up the oil, drop the cheap oil that I put in it, and I went and got some actual motorcycle fully synthetic oil to go in it. Got the new filter to throw on there. and we're basically getting this bad boy wrapped up. So here we are on day 5, which technically is day 6 because I got the electrical stuff done yesterday, and then we had some plumbing issues, so I spent most of the day yesterday crawling under the house, blasting through some pipes. So we're just going to call this day 5. So I got all the electrical done. So you can see we still got some dielectric grease floating around, not a big deal. So I jacked it up and loosened the axle nut. And on rear drum brakes like this, you always need to make sure that when you're adjusting the chain, back off the brake adjustment so it's not trying to pull it. So I've got the lock nuts off, and I've got the carter pin out, the axle's loose, and I've got it back down on the ground because I'm using a 2x4 under here on a floor jack, and it was causing issues with the chain, so it was pushing the chain over. These are loose so I can jack it up. I've still got straps on the front. So I'm adjusting the chain, and I thought I would throw out a little tip. So when you're adjusting the chain, obviously you want to adjust it to where your back wheel is straight and in line with your front wheel. So if I were to turn this one more than this one, the wheel would actually be in there cockeyed. And a lot of motorcycles have got, which I don't see, ooh, there's a bunch of grease on that, but I don't see it on this one, any type of gauges to where if we look over here on this R6, we can kind of see this bracket here and it lines up with the edge here. But I never use these because there's play in these keepers, and you don't know if it's sitting forward because when you tighten it, it could pull it forward. So what I always do is I take a tape measure and I measure from the center of the axle bolt to a fixed location. So on this one, it's easier to get here because of all this crap in the way. On like the R6 or a sport bike, I always measure from the center line of the axle to the center line of the swing arm pivot bolt. And obviously I'm doing this one-handed, so. And you could use anything. Like up here, we have this frame bolt, and there's one on each side. Just kind of mocking it up, so if you, and it's not going to work, but basically you take that measurement from a fixed point to the axle, and then you just make sure that they're both the same on each side. So on this one, I'm going from the center line to the center line of this shock bolt, and I'm at about 15 5/8. Now with it sitting on the ground, and let's just make an assumption that I had to bring this side of the tire forward. Well, when you loosen this up, you see that play that's in there? Take you a Tanya Harding, smack on the back wheel. Now you can see that that's tight. So it has actually shifted and pushed it forward. So now if we take a measurement, we're now looking somewhere in the range of, one-handed sucks doing this type of stuff. Looking to be about 15 and a half, eyeballing it, I'm sure it's off. And then what I can do is, since I pushed it forward, I can measure that side and tighten this as it pulls the wheel back, and tighten it up till I get my measurement and I get the amount of chain slack that I want. So that's obviously way too loose. That's getting better. I don't know what the weight of the person who's going to buy this bike is, so I'm going to leave it a little on the loose side, but not enough to where it can jump teeth on the sprockets. So I'm getting that taken care of. Then I'm going to button down the tank temporarily because I still need to sink the carburetors, but I want to get this thing out so I can degrease, see if I can get a lot of the rubber and road grime out of here, degrease the chain and get it lubed up. So that's where we're at on day whatever the hell this is. So we just dropped the oil out. I'm gonna go ahead and do an oil change on it while it's up here on the bench. We've got the new oil filter installed. My paint marker died, but what I normally do is I normally write the mileage and the date of the oil change on the actual oil filter. So I'm just gonna have to give them a sticker instead, or just put it on my notes when I hand the bike back over. Waiting on turn signals pretty much at this point. I'm gonna go ahead and get everything buttoned up, cleaned up, get that chain cleaned and lubed. It's already adjusted. Like I said, I was going to keep it a little tight and then clean the carbs and the turn signals, and I think or not clean the carbs, but sink the carbs. Maybe play with the adjustment on them a little bit, but then I think we're pretty much done with this guy. We're ready for a new owner. Thoroughly gone through, in my opinion. Well, today is tomorrow, and I'm getting ready to tune the carburetors. I'm getting this thing warmed up. It's idling. I got my sync tool calibrated to a single vacuum source. So now what I'm going to do is, what we're going to do here is I've got to pull the tank off, and this tank has got a diaphragm fuel pump in it coming off of the vacuum source for the other carburetor. So I've got to hang another tank to give it a fuel source. So I'm just going to use the one off my little 50. I'm going to hang it up and get fuel that way. Each one of these hoses is going to go to the vacuum port on the front side of the carburetor. You can't do it from the back. One, there's no vacuum ports, but you have to do it on the front side closest to the head. And then we're just going to fire it up and see where we get our vacuum lines for each cylinder, and we're just going to play with the adjustment until we get them both drawing the same amount of vacuum while the engine's running, and that's basically syncing the carburetors. If it was 4 carburetors, then you would sync these 2 together and then those 2 together, and then you would do the center adjustment to bring them all into line that way. So I'm going to go ahead and get set up and get this done. Alright, so here we have it hooked up. I don't know if you can hear me. So this bank right here is the left side, this one's the right side. As you can see, they're drawing different amounts of vacuum. So we have, and I do believe it's that screw right inside there. We come in here, see if I can get straighter on it. So that's going the wrong way. You can see the right side going down, the left side going up. Adjust our idle now. And there we go. That is all it's to balancing a set of carburetors. You don't want to rev it too high so it sucks the fluid up into the engine, but that's just me pushing down on the throttle with the actual screwdriver. Like that, each cylinder is now balanced. Now I can just go ahead and start putting this thing all back together. I did find out that the clicking sound that we're hearing coming from the head is actually the timing chain. It's not that it's bad, it's just a little loose, and once the actual timing adjuster down there, once it wears in just a little bit more and that thing clicks out to its next position, that sound is going to go right away. And I basically did that by doing the old screwdriver. Put your ear on this part and you just start moving it around, and you can actually locate where the clicking sound is. To get way in here while it was running so I didn't burn myself, I used the Ultimate Screwdriver 9000, just had my finger in the way. So I could listen here and I could listen here, and it's clicking more up in here, which tells me that the chain's going around and it's actually just bouncing on the adjuster just a little bit. So once that thing wears into where that adjuster can pop back out one more notch, that sound will actually just clear right up. So we've got the chain adjusted yesterday, which is still day 5 or 4, I don't even know what day of the video we're on, but had a bunch of stuff I had to do yesterday. Go see the chiropractor. Got the chain adjusted, still got to get it cleaned up, get this cover on, put all this thing back together, and I think do a little bit more carb adjusting as far as the idle air goes. I think it's running just a little rich. Other than that, she's just about done. Oh, I'm supposed to be getting the turn signals hopefully today, so I'll still have to figure out this situation, but we'll get it done.